Villages used to look like this, and now look at them. The Nether was so simple, and now it is beautiful, while the end cities look like this in 2015, and in 2025 they are, oh. Well, here are Minecraft world features that don't exist anymore, and we'll be giving a rating of whether they should or not later. These are all in a current copy of my survival world that I played since 2012, and once you'll see them, you'll find that maybe they're in your world too. Today, I want to explore the question of whether these features should still exist in any way, or whether Minecraft World Gen used to be way worse back in the day, and I want to go through by starting with the definition of what is an extinct Minecraft World Gen feature, and that would be something that exists in your Minecraft world that wasn't built by you, was built by the world generation algorithm, and that it would have generated for everyone, but now it won't generate for anyone. Okay, that's out of the way, then let's get right into this. Hello, I'm Abyax Toy Dog, and welcome to my long-term survival Let's Play world. There are some things that are weird here that are very easy to see, while others are much harder to clock, but I guarantee that something in this video will give you a fun nostalgia shock. And so let's start with something that's topical and relevant right now, because I have a world that predates the aquatic update, maybe obviously, but what you might find interesting is there wasn't just one update to the oceans, there were actually two, and I have both types of old ocean. So when this world was first generated, 1.8.2 in the Java parlance, there were actually far more frequent oceans, and they made up about 70% of the landmass, according to seed mapping apps at the time. However, the oceans were very, very shallow for the most part, and so this is the biggest ocean in my old Xbox 360 size world, but it's still very tiny because instead of being Java terrain, it's Xbox 360 terrain, which had to make everything much smaller to fit in an 864 by 864 world, and so the largest, the deepest point this ocean ever gets is just 3 blocks deep. You can barely drown someone in this ocean, but that is the truth of trying to have an ocean that fits into a very tiny world. Interestingly, the oceans got less common and therefore smaller after 1.7, the update that changed the world, but for me, I have the exact inverse, because when that update came out, I made my world bigger, and the larger part of this world that existed for the Xbox One actually therefore had more space to make the biomes closer to their truest size, and so here you can see the oceans that were effectively smaller, but in my world are much bigger. Now they go from being barely 3 blocks deep to being 6, 7, and sometimes even 9 blocks deep. I have all sorts of different weird oceans, and it's very, very fun to see these by comparison to how oceans are now, because they look so bland and they literally look like someone made them very lazily, like just while programming because they needed a placeholder. And honestly, that probably is how the oceans were made, but I have both old types of ocean in my Let's Play world alongside the newer ones if you get far enough out, and it's kind of fun to have all 3 types of ocean gen in one place. Speaking of having old and new gen mixing together, the place where this is probably clearest is my end. I wasn't just making a silly joke, it is something you can notice. My end was initially generated on the Xbox 360 and therefore was limited and not infinite, just like the rest of console, and this has caused some very interesting things for me. One being the fact that if you wanted to explore more end on the Xbox 360, you could reset the entire dimension. Effectively, there was a delete your end option in the settings. This means I have multiple Ender Dragon eggs, but it also means for reasons I can't quite comprehend, I have multiple stacked end portal gateways. Why is it that we have 2 on top of each other? And how did a third end up there? More importantly, do they go to the same place? I guess we'll find out, because I've flown into the top one before, but I've never flown into the bottom one. Do you think it goes? Oh, it does. Okay, I don't like what I did there. But here you can see my main end island is also a victim of its own generation confusion, because this end island was generated on the Xbox 360, where they had to make them far smaller, and then when I imported it into Bedrock and went to the end for the first time, the game was like, oh yeah, there's meant to be end going all the way out to there. And so the way it generated led to this very strange, weird situation where I have not 1 end island in the center of my world, but 2, and in fact 3, although I've been long since working on destroying that one. This is just a weird reality of having a world that has survived so many different platforms, and anyone who plays an Xbox 360, Xbox One, or indeed any console edition world that is now on Bedrock has something like these quirks, because old ends used to be different to how they are now, and we can see that by comparing how the end would generate now versus how it is in my world. It is a night and day difference, even on the exact same seed. But one of the funniest differences in my opinion is not here in the main end, or the fact that I have 21 of these end portal gateways, when you're meant to have 20 by the way. Just, you can count them if you want to, but they all are there. But what's most interesting to me is what happens at the fringes. Okay, so this is a part of the video I haven't checked on, and I haven't seen this in my world in forever, but if I'm not mistaken, when the End Islands were added... Wait, what is a... Wait. I'm so sorry. Wait, what is that? What is that doing here? Oh, no. Don't tell me it's happened again. Wait, there's two of them? Oh, no. Why? I swear to God, this isn't planned, and also this is life-ruining information that I'll deal with in the future. If they're not simulated in my chunks, they won't be flying, right? So maybe that's one of the reasons I haven't flown here in years. But basically, when End Islands came to the Xbox 360, there was a problem because the worlds could only be so big, and the way they solved that problem was by creating different parts of your same dimension for the End Islands. These End Islands were very, very tiny, and I actually realized when I was going from the Xbox 360 to the Bedrock version, it'd be fun to see how they dealt with the fact that these were all stored in different dimensions, and so I built a big stone slab kind of line around my old end, and here's what it looks like now. Again, there is a random square cut out of my end generation because these are where the Xbox 360 chunks meet the new ones, and it's fascinating to look at, is it not? I mean, how can you not find it fascinating? Apparently, there's some issue that this causes where extra Ender Dragons appear sometimes, and I'm going to choose not to think about those, and I'd prefer it if you didn't as well. Please don't leave a comment reminding me there are multiple dragons I'm going to have to fight at some point. I don't enjoy reminding myself of that. In fact, let's leave this dimension as a whole. Speaking of holes, do you mind if I show you mine? I've heard it's a good way to make some extra money on the internet, and I have some really weird abnormalities in my Minecraft world, and this might be the strangest. It's a hole that goes all the way through my world, straight through the bedrock layer, and into the void. This is not meant to happen. You are never meant to be able to access the void, but I have because of a weird quirk in old Java world generation. So if you don't know, the Xbox 360 and all other console versions actually use Java world generation, and so that means that when there's a very rare bug in the Java code, which sometimes causes the lava to replace the blocks below it, it's something that doesn't become very well known about, and even when it does become known about, it's not a very big deal, because lava isn't something most people are jumping through. Even if you jumped into a pit of lava that replaced the bedrock, you wouldn't notice because it would kill you before you went there. It would only affect creative players or people draining their lava pits, and so although it was fixed, a lot of people have these. I know Sword King from Operation Bedrock does, and your old console world may do, that you'd never notice. But what's interesting is these old pits became a problem in 1.18 when the bedrock below your world got turned into deep slate. This was a problem because the bedrock below did not exist, and so when the world was creating what should be below there, it for some reason copied that missing bedrock and created this, a hole in my void. And you know, I really don't want to do this, but I'm going to try my best anyway. I'm going to fly out of the world, and I'm going to show you that something that should never be possible in a survival world, but is possible in mine. This isn't some weird hacking. It's not even the weird thing people do nowadays, where they selectively choose what does and doesn't count as a cheat by going back to older versions. This is something that naturally happened that I just have in my Minecraft world. And is it fun? Yes. Is it crazy that I could load and unload chunks by flying around underneath them all day? Yes. But yeah, this is, as far as I can tell, the only hole in bedrock in my world, and it is a very rare feature. And yeah, oh god, oh no, okay. And I would be very careful for anyone who chooses to play around with this. Okay, let's now talk about the fourth interesting thing that you can find only on my world, and it's this, a village desert well. So this is the type of village well that would exist before 1.14, the Village and Pillage update. It's a lot deeper than a regular desert well. Look how ridiculously far down it goes. And what's interesting about this is that Minecraft villages used to generate from the village well out, and they had a fairly decent success rate, but that meant that 1 in 8 times the village would just fail to generate, and so it's not that I've removed the rest of the village. This is just a part of village that never had the rest generate around it. We have zombie villages, sure, apparently, but we don't have any regular villages or any regular village buildings, and so we have a random desert well to go with the other desert well, both of which being useful because you can find water in a desert, which is just never possible in any other way, of course. So speaking of finding water in any other way, the fifth feature that I have in my world is one you probably have in yours no matter how little you've explored if you generated created it before 1.18 because this is a surface lake and they used to be really common. Seriously, here is a surface lake, and how long do you think I have to travel to find another one? Well, you can probably guess from the fact that I said they're common that, wow, there's a second one right here, and in fact, if we go a little bit further, you can see there's a third just over there, and I'll stop pointing them out, but for now I'll just say that this is a terrain feature that used to be quite common before 1.18 that got phased out after that update. No longer can you find 1 or 2 block deep water pieces of terrain, and honestly, in some ways this is a good thing, in some ways this is wonderful, because if they had just removed these water lakes, this plains biome would be so much flatter and so much easier to build on. For terrain that is this close to my world origin in terms of coordinates, it's surprising that I've never built here, and perhaps one of the big reasons is that it's not actually as flat as a plains biome should be, because these water surface lakes were just kind of ruining it and digging right into there. Speaking of being close to the world origin, by the way, I'd like to point out the one thing that's immediately clear when you look at maps of this world, and I do have a lot of those maps, but it's something you'll notice on anyone's world if they've been playing it since the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, or Wii U edition, or even if they played on the later gen consoles but chose to have a classic world size, because this is a world border. I obviously have this big collection of stone right here, but even if you remove the stone and pretend it doesn't exist, there is always going to be this weird lake that exists at the edge of your world. Why is this? Because this block right here didn't used to be a block previously. It used to be that looking past this point, you would see endless ocean. You see, Minecraft, when it came to... Think about an Xbox 360 compared to a current PC. It has 512 megabytes of RAM and a weird tri-core processor from IBM. If you look at the specs, they're actually absolutely ridiculous. But basically, trying to get a fairly demanding Java game in terms of what it required from you RAM and CPU-wise onto a console that didn't have that power was a really, really big challenge. And so what did they do? They capped out one of the biggest variables, your world size. The world still looked infinite, but after a certain point it would be endless ocean, but it meant that they had to fade your terrain out before that endless ocean, and so even though the world was 864 by 864, it went out to 432 on the X and Z coordinates. Somewhere about 10 blocks before that, you would transition into an ocean, and so it meant that when you expanded your world later, using the Xbox One tool, yeah, you could see that the world terrain would kick right back in, but no matter how they did it, there was always going to be this big ocean wall, and so as a result, there is a big world border that represents the sick thing found in my world that you cannot get today. And honestly, even though I like my world border because it reminds me of the part of my world, all those, a lot of people ask, how do I keep this world going after all these years? It was always my goal from the start to slowly have a world that got more and more ridiculously terraformed, but the world I pictured all those years ago, and the world I was terraforming for the years that I first stuck with that, was this Xbox 360 sized 864 by 864 world. And so the answer to how did I keep things going is kind of by saying, the world is infinite, but I go into the infinite part every now and then, not all of the time. Speaking of not all of the time, beyond just seeing the weird borders that are very, very obvious, I'm sure, you'll also notice looking at this map that inside of that zone, the world terrain looks massively different to outside. One, there's far less water, because again, they had to minimize oceans, and two, I think this one is perhaps even more interesting, there are so many different biomes. There's swamp here, there's desert here, there's jungle here, there's a forest over here, there's a savanna or something over there, and ultimately this isn't because I've changed the biomes in any way, although I have made my own biomes. This is my birch forest with a fake cherry tree. That is my cherry grove, and I've got many constructed biomes, like this volcano, but I also have to take advantage of the fact that because worlds were limited, they wanted to fit so many biomes in there that biome scales were so ridiculously small. If you play Java today, or Bedrock today, the only option you'll ever find is large biomes, and that's only on Java. Bedrock players aren't allowed that, whereas Minecraft on all consoles, where I started this world, if I can remind you for the 56th time, Minecraft on consoles actually had small world biome generation, meaning you could skip straight from a forest to a lake to a plains, to a swamp, and what's even more interesting than this, by the way, is, you know, to kind of, rather than making it its own point, I'll add it as part of this, my biomes are not just tiny, my swamp biome goes from here to there, but also it doesn't line up with my terrain. Before 1.2.5, your world would, you know, find out what biomes, or what coordinates are in what biomes by checking your seed, because they assumed if you had a seed, you know, if you had a world, it was loaded up in that update, and so your biomes would constantly move around. So this extreme hills or regular hills biome is a swamp. It doesn't look anything like a swamp, right? Because it didn't generate as one. And indeed, my famous example of this is the fact that over here, at the very edge of the world, I have a desert that was a desert when I generated it. I had tens of thousands of blocks of sand, but then the biomes moved around, meaning it rained there, and I figured if my desert isn't even legally a desert biome, then why don't I get rid of it? And so here is my not desert desert that looks like I destroyed it so bad that the rain came back. And you know, I guess we could argue that's kind of true, even though it's functionally not. And so, yeah, speaking of old biome sizes and positions, one of my favorite versions of the last 2 points I've just raised, it's not Elder Guardians, I hate those guys. Okay, so the seventh feature is one that you're going to immediately notice because this is a pure survivor world, and yet I have random bedrock floating in the nether here. You know that I didn't mine that bedrock, you know I didn't place it, so how did it end up floating in the sky? There's a lot of it floating around my nether, and the answer is due to that same world border issue. The way world borders were handled in the overworld, because of the limited world sizes, was endless ocean, but you can't have endless ocean in your nether, lava or otherwise. Actually, they could have had an endless lava ocean if they wanted to, but what they went for instead was bedrock walls. This is something Jebba said is his intended kind of idea, that the nether exists in a big box, it's just a very wide box, and so as a result, my Xbox 360 nether, which existed for years, had these big walls around the edge, and so when it came to time to convert to bedrock with its infinite worlds, these walls were mostly retained. In some cases you can see there's a nether fortress that generated at the very edge, creating some weird things, but even though they mostly transitioned this old world with bedrock walls to the new world, their code was not quite perfect, and so when they came to remove all of the bedrock walls, they removed about 99.9% effectively, but we were left with blocks like this. And I want to show you something that I found while I was about to show you this. This is the amazing thing about this world. It's accidentally got a bunch of living, breathing history in it. Let me show you something weird about the chunks at the edge of the world that would have previously been the old nether. This is what they look like. Is there anything notable about this to you? There might not be if you play Java with, I think it's called the Distant Horizons mod, but you're not meant to be able to see your true render distance in the nether. There's a really dumb fact, actually, that Minecraft generates all of these chunks of render distance and then deliberately covers them up. So if I leave this biome by just heading a few blocks this way, it's going to give you that same nether fog, and everything you can see in that direction is going to be crowded in and slowly go missing because you're not meant to be able to see this far. Look at that. I can see less far here than I could over there. And why is that? Because every single nether biome has this fun, you know, has this quirk to it, which is that it's meant to cut down your render distance, because when you can see in the nether, a lot of the danger is removed. This is why Distant Horizons isn't meant to be played with, but different point for a different time. And so as a result, I clearly have chunks in my nether that are regular overworld biomes. In fact, if you want more proof of that, what a perfect time to find it. Here you can see that these chunks with these infinite render distances in them actually have skeletons, zombies, and creepers. So if I wanted to start a creeper farm, I could theoretically do it in my nether, which is just ridiculous. But Minecraft didn't handle the transition, and they clearly they don't intend to if this many years have passed with this bug still existing. And so as a result, we can say that, fun fact, I have zombies and creepers in my nether. Isn't that ridiculous? The answer is yes, by the way. Oh, speaking of ridiculous, I'm so glad it's right over here. I thought I'd have to travel some distance. This is a biome that was exclusive to the Xbox 360 version of the game. It's called the Neverwart Valley, or you can call it the Soul Sand Valley, but that would be inaccurate. But basically, soul sand used to generate not just inside of fortresses, like it used to in the pre-1.16 Nether, but on console, it would generate all over the place, because if you didn't have a fortress in your limited world, or if you did, but it was cut off or didn't grow long enough, you wouldn't have access to nether warts, which means no access to potions or that one absolutely beautiful block. And so what was the solution? Having this biome right here. Now that we have the Soul Sand Valley, it looks small and quaint, and it's kind of funny actually that mine is spawning skeletons inside of it. But yeah, this is because there is no biome here, or at the very most, I guess we could say it's an overworld biome. I wonder which overworld biome, actually. If I made a creative copy of the world, I could probably place some grass or water down to find out. Okay, so here's how I find out what biome we're in. If you place grass in the nether, it looks wilted like you're in a desert. If we place grass in these chunks, however, it looks not quite plains, but a little bit like a cold biome, I would say. Which means what we need to do is we need to spawn in, say, a pig, because pigs have 3 variants, hot, cold, and neutral. And so let's see which of those spawn. It's neutral. So it's a neutral biome, maybe in extreme hills, maybe a plains. So then what we need to do is we need to grab some bone meal, and we need to test what it is that grows on this patch of dirt. Oh, I think that means it's a plains. Weirdly enough. Oh, that's not meant to happen. Also, I want to know, can I place a water bucket down in these corners of my nether? I would expect that the dimension rules override the biome rules, and I would be correct. So even though it's a plains biome, I can't place water here, but I can, using the fill command, I don't know, make 10 blocks of water. And so if we do that, you can see, yeah, it's just regular water. So I want to know, if ice breaks here, will it turn into water? If ice melts here, maybe even? Okay, so the answer is no. It is a dimension-wide override. The ice does not turn into water. But if I ever do want to turn a corner of my nether into a plains biome, I know the place to do it. It's handy, isn't it? Man, it's it's crazy that I can see all the way over to there. Like, look at that. That is my Cherry Grove biome. That's so far away in my mind because I can't see it. But adding the ability to see it, and the nether becomes a much more approachable place. Yeah, I see why this can't exist normally. Anyway, let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so number 10 takes us to what is one of the strangest seeming looking art projects I've ever made in my world, but I didn't make this. I swear this was naturally generated by Minecraft itself. This is a pillager outpost in my Minecraft world, and as you might notice, it's not necessarily functional. This isn't because I tore it apart and made it myself, but instead because I explored the chunks in my world from that direction, from further away from the world origin, but not this chunk right here. I'm gonna have to put that back later. But because I explored most of the chunks in this world, it meant I had a bit of a problem, which was that where a pillager outpost was meant to generate was partially on old chunks and partially on new chunks. Minecraft had just worked out some really cool new code that could smooth old and new terrain, and the result was that it tried to smooth the old and new, creating this monstrosity. This is something that will never naturally generate. Usually if you see a structure that's weird, it just got a giant base below it, like this, but this is a weird 3/4 pillager outpost, and if you want to see something even weirder, because this is an area I explored a lot after the aquatic update came out, I have lots of strange kind of versions of this hanging around. So I have, for example, a desert temple that is hanging out in the middle of an ocean over there. I have, for an even weirder example, micro mesa biomes and parts of my ocean that are oddly deserts with no good reason. But my favorite part of all is not this desert temple, which is perfectly wedged between a mangrove swamp and an endless ocean, but instead what's found at the bottom of the ocean. So here is what I would have to describe as our 10th, if we're excluding bonus features. A bunch of water exists at the bottom of my ocean that isn't water. There are air pockets down here that would be impossible to... You could not place this here if you wanted to. If you tried, the water would fill down. I assumed at first a stronghold tried to generate and then didn't, but I still don't know the official reason why there are random pockets of ocean here. What I do know, though, is if I place some blocks down, I can have it be torched up and actually see down here. And also I know that for some reason, there's also grass at the bottom of my ocean. Again, lots of questions, no real answers. If you have a theory as to what happened here, I would love to hear it. But for now, I just have random holes at the bottom of my ocean, which are nice for viewing everything else from, I guess. Oh, it's crazy. You can see the rain through the surface of the ocean from down here. That is something you were never meant to see in Minecraft. Anyway, with that said, let's move on to the 11th weird broken feature. Okay, so I want to touch on this next one briefly. I, funnily enough, have the exact opposite scenario from in my ocean, where I have water that is not where it's supposed to be. It's meant to be air there, but for some reason we have this instead. But the actual cursed, bizarre feature is this not never roof, this roof of what would have been Bedrock but is now Deep Slate. This is an unavoidable flaw between having a pre-1.18 world and having the post-1.18 caves below it, is you would have had a Bedrock floor that all got converted into Deep Slate, and so a lot of caves that are meant to have a lot of ceiling to them instead have a perfectly flat roof. If this cave generated today on this same seed, you'd be able to go quite far up there, but you can't do that. I'm actually kind of curious as to what it would look like with that water. Is that water meant to be there, or is that a weird different quirk? But anyway, this is something a lot of worlds have, so I won't spend too much time on it, but the Deep Slate roof is something I've always thought is fun, and okay, let's be careful. Let's get ourselves out of this one, and right into the next. So here we are, back in my desert. You might recognize it, but I'm not here to show you my desert. I'm not here to show you my Elder Guardian. I'm here to show you something I discovered most recently, because Minecraft has not had mushrooms generating caves since that exact same update. 1.18 was the moment where mushrooms stopped naturally generating in caves, and so here is my cave that I never came into until I was destroying it to make room for the 1.21.127 update. I was making space for this next collection of blocks that I wanted to make, and while I was doing that, I found mushrooms in here, a fun reminder that these used to generate all the time. It was also a fun reminder of the last feature that I want to show off today, because extreme hills are something that I have such fond memory of. In fact, the very reason, you know, when you start a Minecraft world, you look around the world for somewhere to start a house, and for me, the journey from spawn, which is where my brick house is, to my first house, which is over here, the reason that I eventually decided on where I did was because of this extreme hills biome that I came into. When you're playing 2012 Minecraft, these mountains are as big as it gets, and this biome was absolutely bonkers to me. But what was even more bonkers and beautiful was the fact that it made this perfect little valley, and just in my head, I immediately knew I wanted to turn it into this enchanted valley, something I later did. But what I thought was fun was that I decided to take this biome as my home, but if you started a Minecraft world today on this seed or any other, you would not be able to find this biome. The Extreme Hills biome, in its initial variant, which I have right here, and then later, for if you played Bedrock specifically, there was a gravel-covered version of this. The Extreme Hills biome stopped existing in the Caves and Cliffs update because Extreme Hills are now just mountains, but they aren't the same biome, they just made a new one to replace it. Which sadly means if you have these fond memories of these super steep, by 2012 standards, because the height limit was 128. If you have memories of these super steep hills, you can only find them in your old worlds, and so if you have fond memories of them too, make sure you go and find your extreme hills, and you cherish and you treasure them, because you'll never find them ever again on a brand new world. Which is actually a good jumping off point for us to ask, which one of these 13 features, plus the bonus, do I think should actually come back to the game? I think that this is a really fun question, and now that we've actually gone through and looked at them all live in my world, I think it is worth saying that honestly, for most of them, the answer is probably not. Looking down our list, I think that old oceans are worse than new oceans, especially for new players. I think the end islands being square and having multiple stacked end gateways is nice, but it's nice because it's weird. It's not good because it's weird. I think the world border is the biggest one that I would argue should come back. I think that modern Minecraft should allow you to limit your world size because it can be really daunting. If Mojang and Jeb believe that the game is one block at a time, you should be allowed to limit the number of blocks that you ever come into, and Minecraft console allowed us to do that perfectly. I would love if modern Minecraft allowed us to do the same. I think the Nether works better as a closed loop dimension, and I think that biome sizes are better small than large. But I think that in terms of everything else, the only arguments I would make that need to definitely come into modern Minecraft is mushrooms coming back to caves or the Neverwalk Valley biome. But ultimately, I think that most players would be happy if they could have small, limited worlds where you felt like you were making a real impact on everything because you could see it all. Minecraft actually did the exact opposite and removed old-size worlds recently, which I think is a real step in the wrong direction. Sure, Minecraft is the game where your imagination can be limitless, but that doesn't mean that the world needs to be limitless. In the same way that, you know, oh, your imagination is limitless, but stacks go up to 64, it'd be nice if we could limit the world and not at 30 million blocks on Java or 12 million on Bedrock. But that's just my opinion, a game opinion. What about the kind of second question you might have, which is, okay, Toycat, you just said you don't even want most of these features in your world, so is your world ruined? Honestly, I'm gonna say, nah. I have scars that show things I've survived in the real world, and I love that my long-term world has basically the same thing. You might not be proud of every single scar or how you got it, especially in my case, but I do say that, having all of these quirks that show off the weird history of the game, some of which made by me, some of which came naturally, is one of the things that makes me really love this. And so my advice finishing this video and having truly looked around the depths and corners of my Minecraft world, including another lake by the way, is that you should start a world today because there are going to be things you'll find weird about it in 13 years, and what's not to love about that? Anyway, with that said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Make sure to, I don't know, like, favorite, and subscribe if you did, because I obviously spend a lot of time looking around this world, whether it's for putting it up on the marketplace reasons and stuff like that, and it's kind of cool to realize that it's a living, growing piece of history that if you want to own, you can do precisely that right now. But with that said, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you to everyone who's been supporting the journey over the past 13 years, and I hope that we make a similar one in another 13. I don't know what platform it will be on, but I know I'm looking forward to doing it, because thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.